boom, he was out and I caught him and I remember he flew out of the water. I leaned back and I held him to me and I was like, "Ah, that was what I was waiting for."
From three planned home births to the importance of your mindset going into each labor and how that can actually impact your birth as a whole, to the beauty of giving birth and the difficulty of it, this episode is an amazing one. You're listening to the Fearless Mothering Podcast. I'm your host, Alex Schoenberger, and this is the show for moms who are looking at entering motherhood, encouraged, enthusiastic, and most importantly, fearless. In today's episode, I am very honored to have another special guest sharing her birth stories with us. It's a little bit different as this is a mama of three. Her name is Ivania, and she is a photographer local to the Okotoks area and Greater Calgary. I was really excited when I saw that she booked in to share her stories on the podcast because she has been a home birthing mom for all three of her babies. So grab a cup of coffee or a glass of wine and get into this episode. All right. Welcome, Ivania. Thank you so much for being willing to come on the podcast today. I'm absolutely honored that you want to come and share your insights as a mom and be just willing to give back to a community that I think really needs more and more stories. So thank you for coming.
Oh, I look for any excuse to talk about my birth. Ask anyone who knows me. So
I love that.
really, you're just giving me an outlet. This is a favorite of me.
Good. This is why I do this because it's great. And honestly, I love listening to them. So I'm
Oh, me
very
too.
excited. So why don't you just maybe give us a little bit of an intro of who you are, maybe if you do anything for work, how many kids you have, and then once we're done that, we'll get into the, meat and potatoes.
My name is Ivania. I am a part-time family newborn photographer. I have three kids. I had my third in July. He will be 6 months on New Year's Day, and
Whoa.
it goes by faster each time.
I believe that. I've heard that. Yeah.
I I can't believe he wasn't born last week.
Yeah. Yeah. Especially that first year, it just feels like super long. And then all of a sudden, yeah, they're like 6 months old and you're like, what?
Yep. Yep.
So that's fair. So you have three. So obviously we're not going to have time to like get into the nitty gritty of each one. But I would love to just maybe open the floor and hear what you want to say about each of your births. We can get into as much or as little detail as you want. The floor is yours.
Well, I was looking through the questions or like the things to reflect on that you sent me. Um, and a couple of the questions, there were a few together that made me think maybe I should talk about my first birth, but I actually realized that they'd be applicable to all of them. Just how I think you'd said before too that your birth and your mindset before birth really does set the tone for like your new motherhood. And that
Yeah.
without realizing it actually has totally been the case each time. Like if I look back and reflect on my mentality going into labor, during birth, the way I looked at things right after birth, and the way that kind of carried over the attitude or the tone, I guess, um, of each postpartum experience. All different, but like I can see that pattern each time.
Yeah.
With my first birth, I can go into if I go into more detail, I'll tell the story of my third just because it's the freshest in my mind. But
Sure. Yeah.
just as kind of a summary, with my first, oh, I had so many expectations. I had like such a clear view of like what kind of mom I was going to be. I thought I was hot crap because I'm the oldest of seven. So I was like, I am not going to be like a neurotic new mom. I'm
Yeah.
going to know what I'm doing. I like whatever. Um, I just had this vision of myself just like having zero cares and being super confident. Had pretty clear expectations of the way that I wanted labor to go, just because, like in birth classes, they often, like, there is a clear pattern of how labor goes, but I didn't really have any flexibility in my mind for that. I was just like, then this is going to happen, then this is going to happen, this is going to happen,
Yeah.
and have a baby. And that really, really made things a lot harder for me. Just the whole experience, it made it so hard because instead of just being able to be present, I just focused on what the way I wanted things to be and then was
Mm.
upset when they weren't that way. So my first my first labor, birth, postpartum, and my daughter in general just taught me. I don't think I'd ever really had to think about how to be present before and how to just like be. So I really had to learn that a lot in the first year of her life. But I'm really glad I did because it really benefited me. It's just a good thing to do. Or just learning how to like choose to be grateful and choose to be joyful instead of like waiting for your exterior circumstances to be the way you want them to be so that you feel a certain way, being like, no, I choose to be grateful for all of these things, including the hard parts. And it
Yeah.
just made such a difference. So then having learned all those hard lessons with my second, I had no expectations at all,
Hmm.
really, or very few expectations, I would say, with my second labor and postpartum. If anything, I just had very low expectations, being like, this is going to be hard and it's going to suck. And that's about
Yeah,
it.
that's
Um,
too
and so,
real.
and so maybe because the bar was very low, my second labor mentally was so much easier. I was able to really, not quite surrender, but just, I don't know, mentally it was just a lot easier. I mean, physically it was also a lot shorter. And then postpartum was just night and day. I would wake up with my first with just like harrowing anxiety of like terrified to wake up in the morning. And I remember being like, okay, when is this going to hit? With my second, and it never did. And I was just fine.
Wow.
And I do think it's because, um, again, my expectations were so low. And I was like, I think you're just able to be like, oh, the baby's teething. I'm not sleeping. This sucks, but it's going to be over. Like, this isn't my life now.
Yeah.
This is a blip. And then with my third, I think I kind of romanticized my second a little bit, my second labor, my second postpartum, just everything with that. So I kind of maybe ruined things for myself a little bit because I did that because there's also a bigger age gap. My first two, there's 2 years, and then my second two, there's 3 years.
Okay.
So it also, memories faded and forgot about a lot of the hard things probably. Uh,
As we do.
as we do. So I do think I kind of romanticized the labor and postpartum of my second. And so then again, with my third, I was in a horrible headspace. I did not feel like giving birth. I had such a bad attitude, which is really sad looking back because it was actually such a beautiful birth. But the whole time I was just like, I don't want to do this. This sucks. I don't want to do this. And that a little bit carried into my postpartum as well. Like I had a really beautiful postpartum. Again, my husband was off for 6 weeks. He took such good care of
Yeah.
me. But again, because I was like, oh, my second was so chill, like he barely fussed. And then, my third is a totally pretty chill, totally normal baby, but is a normal baby and would fuss or we would have hard parts. And I'd be like, ugh, this sucks. It's not as easy as the last time, or like
Right.
I
Yeah.
miss sleeping. So thankfully he got a little bit easier. I kind of resettled into new motherhood and relearned how to be more present and more grateful.
That's so interesting. I love that you like really talk about your mindset going into each labor because I think that we don't focus on that enough, right? It's all like, well, with our first, and I'd love to hear your thought on this. Like, it's often, okay, what externally do we need to have ready, right?
Oh,
Is your
totally.
fridge stocked? Is your nursery prepped? Do you have the best stroller? Do you have the proper car seat? And all of those things, but you're not actually thinking about, like, okay, am I mentally prepared for labor? And you've got like one of two moms. It's either cocky, that's how I describe myself too, or like scared shitless. Like, excuse my language, but that's the reality. It's either as a first time mom, you're either one of those two things. And I think that, yeah, you going through it and showing the difference, like, also, I think moms need to hear that is that it's not just going to keep getting easier. Like, each baby is going to be this like blissful, I was so like excited and ready to give birth again. It's like, no, it's actually also harder because you know what's coming and you know that it's hard and it's not like the most pleasant experience when you go through it and when it's like the looming what has to happen next. Obviously, like retrospectively, we can look at it and be like, wow, what a beautiful experience. But like in it, you're not gonna be like, this is so beautiful, you
No,
know?
with my second, actually, I think I experienced the most fear like during my second pregnancy. I remember I picked up, I think it was, no, it wasn't Ina May's book. It was some book. It was a book of birth stories, and I was reading through the birth stories. Um, and I think I was in the van waiting for a client to show up for a photo session. I was just sitting reading this birth story. And every time I would get to the part where they talk about like active labor starting and started like describing their contractions, I would have this like visceral reaction. And I was like, ooh,
Oh no. Yeah.
I gotta deal, whatever this is, I gotta deal with that.
Or it's gonna
Uh,
come out
yeah.
later.
Weirdly, I didn't really. I talked to my midwife and she was like, oh, well, you could like try journaling about it and like see what comes out. And I was like, oh, okay. Never got around to it. But
Yeah.
then weirdly, when I went into labor with my second, I don't know, I don't know if it's like the time of day and I got enough sleep or
Right.
what, but I was just like, okay, let's
It's
do this.
happening now. Yeah. Yeah. But again, it could be that like difference of like mindset. Like that second time you were saying you had like no expectation, very, very low
That's
expectations,
true.
right? And so it was like, yeah, going into it, period, was a little bit easier than having all of the expectations. So I guess before we get into like more of your birth story with, I know you're saying your third is the one you kind of want to talk about because it's most fresh, but with your first, like first time mom, what kind of prep work did you guys do? Were you like trying to get pregnant the first time? Did it take you very long to get pregnant? Did you do a lot of like education, childbirth ed? Like what did that look like before you had your first?
My first was a surprise. We'd been married for a year and a bit, and we weren't trying or
Okay.
not trying. I had some health issues, so I was kind of wondering, I was like, oh, like, are we gonna have to like actively like try to have a baby? Because I'd assumed it would just kind of happened by now.
Happened, yeah.
And I think I even talked about like, okay, like if by 3 years nothing's happened, then we should probably start like looking at this. And I think like the
Yeah.
month later, we were going to some friends for some drinks, and I took a just in case test, and boom, I was the first of any of my friends to get pregnant, and so I really didn't know very much at all. Like I'd had my mom, like I'm the oldest of seven, so I had my mom, but that was like my youngest brother is 14 years younger than me. So I wasn't thinking about any of that. I wasn't paying attention to anything. I
Yeah.
knew having midwife was good. My mom really liked having a midwife. I didn't know how to apply for one. I didn't know what you do after you pee on a stick and it says yes
Yeah.
or no. I didn't know anything. So I think I just like went into like a walk-in clinic and I was like, am I actually, I didn't believe it. I was like,
Right.
I need a professional to tell me that this isn't a joke.
Mm-hmm.
So I think I got some blood work done. Anyway, I applied for a midwife. I didn't hear back. I went to a random OB, had a pretty bad experience. But I think during my dating ultrasound, it gave me a different date than what they had guessed for me. So I went into my midwife application and adjusted that it was like by a couple of days, like by 5 days maybe. But that 5 days moved me from June to July. And so I was able to get a midwife.
Okay.
And now I'm like, oh my goodness, I was so lucky.
Yes.
Yeah. Anyway, so I did get a midwife. As far as prep goes, I like physically I walked a lot. I focused way too much on like being fit as opposed to being like well nourished and like building up energy to give birth. Most of my like health stuff was more about vanity, which is very unfortunate and
Mm.
didn't really benefit me. Although I had a very easy pregnancy, which maybe could be partly attributed to the walking and
Yep.
eating mostly okay.
Yeah. Correlation isn't causation, but it could be a
But it
reason.
could be,
Yes.
you never know.
Yes.
Also I was like 22. I
Mm-hmm.
just turned 22. So I was also very young. I think I talked to an acquaintance of mine and she recommended a couple of parenting books and the birth book. And so that was the book that really had me thinking about, oh, like what kind of birth do I want? Like in my head, I was like, oh, I don't want to be medicated. And that was kind of all I thought about because I knew my
Yeah.
mom never got an epidural. And I was like, okay, well, I probably don't want an epidural. But again, I
Yeah.
didn't really think about it until I read this book. And it talked about the history of obstetrics, talked about like the effects different interventions can have on you. And so for a good chunk of my pregnancy, I assumed I would give birth in a hospital because I was a new mom, because that's what you do, because it was
Yeah.
safer, because you never know. But the more I read, and I will say this book is probably kind of biased towards home births.
Yeah, probably.
I
There's
think it
nothing
is.
wrong with that. As
If
long as
you
you know
are
it.
looking for something objective, I mean, it gives you all the facts. The way I read it, it definitely seemed biased towards home births, which I'm fine with. But anyway,
Yeah.
um, the more I read it, the more I was thinking, like, why do I want to be in a hospital? Do I actually want to be in a hospital? Because I hate hospitals. I
Mm.
hate going to the doctor. Like, I have no positive experiences with going to hospitals and going to the doctors.
Yeah.
and thinking about like I want to have, a peaceful birth. I want to have it unmedicated. I want it to be like a good experience. I want it to feel safe. And I was like, I don't feel safe in hospitals. It's just not,
Yeah.
I don't. So then I was like, I live on the 16th floor, like this tiny little apartment. Like, that's weird, right? Like, I have a baby in an apartment. That's weird. What if my neighbors hear me?
Yeah.
So I was like, I don't know. But then I talked to my husband's boss's wife, who had her first baby in their apartment.
Yeah.
And I asked her about it, and she was like, yeah, it's fine. Just do it. Just don't say anything. And
Hmm.
then I talked to a woman who had done our photos one time, and I found out she had her first baby in her apartment. And she was like, yeah, it was a great experience.
Yeah.
Totally fine. So then I was like, okay, maybe this is an option. So I think I remember being in the car, and in passing, I kind of mentioned it to my husband. Now, my husband is unique, and I'm very grateful for this because he is one of nine, and his mom had the last couple at home, and he was there. He wasn't like there,
Okay.
but he was there.
Yeah,
So
but
this is
heard the things and
yeah,
yeah.
this was super normal for him. So that when I brought it up, expecting him to maybe be like, which a lot of my friends' husbands have done, he was like,
Yes.
yeah, sure.
Cool.
Like
That's what I know. Yeah.
he was totally on board, probably more on board than I was. So I was like, okay.
Cool.
So then I went and
That's
I
very
talked to
unique. Yeah.
yeah, yeah, I love my husband. He's the best. So then after we talked, my next midwife appointment, I went and I was like, so I'm considering a home birth. And I feel like I could tell she got very excited.
Yeah.
She tried to hide it, but I could tell.
Yeah.
But I was like, I really want you to talk to me about the risks. I want you to talk to me about that looks like. And so she did. She walked me through everything. She talked to me about statistics. She
Yeah.
showed me everything that she brought. So by the end of that kind of that appointment, I was like, yep, this is what we're doing. This is what I want. And I didn't look back. I had no doubts about it.
I love that. And I love specifically that you brought up that you asked her for the evidence and that you also looked at what they brought. Because I think when people are considering home births, they think that they're just gonna like freely catch their baby in their bathtub and this like hippy dippy midwife is just going to show up and be like, yeah, cool, you're not bleeding. So great, bye. And when it's like in reality, they have like an infant resuscitation station. They have enough to like resusc mom and baby and keep you guys both alive until EMS can get there. Like they are very well packed and
She
like,
walked me through like every scenario and yeah, like I left feeling really confident.
yeah,
And I was like, this is a trained medical professional who is trained to save mom and baby.
yeah,
Um, and obviously, if there were things that made it seem like it wasn't safe for me to deliver at home, then that
you'd do a
wouldn't be an option.
transfer early.
Yeah, yeah, or
Yep.
that wouldn't have been an option in the first place.
Yes. Well, and I, yeah, I just love that you had the awareness to actually ask about those things, right? Because I think like I was 22 when I had my first baby. I didn't ask what they brought to my house. I was like, I don't care. I'm having my baby at home. Did I have my baby at home? No. But you know what I mean? Like, I didn't have any of that awareness. I didn't read any books. I watched a whole bunch of like Bridget Taylor YouTube videos that I loved. And I like tried to figure out which books to read, but they were, you like get into the like mom and baby section or like
It's very
whatever. It's
overwhelming.
super overwhelming. And then it's like literally every book in there ever that could be anything. Home birth, hospital birth, C-sections are best, home birth is best. Epidurals are amazing. Epidurals suck. Like it's like what if you want to just make up your own decision? And I just got overwhelmed. So I didn't read any books. That's why I like to ask because like in my profession as a doula, I have some clients who come to me who are like, I'm not reading anything unless you tell me to read it, Alex. Or I've read, Ina May's Guide to Childbirth. I've read The Birth Partner. I've read Made for This. I've read whatever, Dr. Newman's Guide to Breastfeeding and everything in between. And it's like, I don't think either is proper. I think we should be reading what we need to be reading or what we want to be reading. Um, so yeah, that's why I like to ask because I think it does impact us. Like you felt secure in having a home birth because you knew that you should ask to see what is brought and what they actually do in certain case scenarios, which is like really important. So if you're ready, do you want to start talking about your most recent birth?
Sure. Um, where do I start? So I'm gonna preface this story with apparently I only have babies in a very short window of the year. My eldest was born on June 28th. My youngest was born on July 1st, and my middle child was born on July 13th.
Wow. Okay, so like 2 weeks.
Yeah. Next year's gonna be crazy for birthday parties. Anyway, so when I got pregnant and I kind of figured my due date, I had the same due date as my daughter.
Okay. Yeah.
She came 10 days early and my second came 10 days early. So I was like, all I wanted, all that I wanted was for this baby to not be born on her birthday.
Yeah.
Ideally after her birthday, because I really, really, really wanted to have a birthday and like just focus on her and not to be about the new baby.
Yeah.
With each pregnancy, I have left things later and later and later.
Hmm.
With my first, I was like ready to go, had like all my home birth stuff, like everything that I needed by like 37 weeks on the dot.
Yeah.
At 36 and 5, the other thing about my pregnancies is that I get Braxton Hicks at like 12 weeks, and that's just my pregnancy is cramping
Oh
constantly.
man. Yeah.
So at 36 and 5, I think I was watching a movie with my husband, and I was kind of sitting there being like, um, this feels a little different. And I was like,
Yeah.
yeah, we don't even have a pool. We have nothing. Ah. I was like,
Oh
also, I was like,
no.
I'm 37 weeks. I do not want to give birth in a hospital. I was like, God, absolutely not.
Yeah.
Like, stop this right now. So I like lay down and went to bed, and I was like, I'm sleeping through it. The baby's not coming. Thankfully, and we were supposed to go camping the next day.
Okay.
Thankfully, nothing happened, and it wasn't like I didn't think I was in labor. But I was just like, this feels different,
Yeah.
and I panicked. Thankfully, this was like a good kick in the butt. I had a ridiculous pre-baby list that my husband categorized, sorted by like level of importance, and we went through all of it in 2 weeks.
Wow. That's exhausting.
Yeah, and I'm really upset. I wish I had done a lot of it sooner or just been like, this actually doesn't matter. But I feel like, I don't know about you, I could become kind of feral at the end of my pregnancy. And the stupidest things
Everyone.
become so important.
Yes.
So he did all of them, even the stupid things. Bless that man. So we went through my entire list. But there were a couple of times leading up to when I actually went into labor where I would feel cramping and I was like, nope, not yet. I'm not ready. I want to do this thing. I want to have this thing done. I want to be this like just like all these reasons in my head. I was
Mm,
just so closed off to the idea of having a baby. I was just like, I'm not ready. I don't want to do this yet.
okay.
So my daughter's birthday came around and that was like I was like, okay, we made
Yeah.
it. Because I think the night before I was cramping pretty bad. And I was like, Jesus, I don't want to do this tonight. I don't want to have a baby on her birthday. Like, give me a couple more days, please. And nothing happened.
Yeah.
We had her birthday. It was really chill. It went great. And after that, I was like, okay, maybe. Like, I would kind of like a couple of days to just breathe, like
Yeah.
if there was like this lead up, and I would be happy to just relax for a little bit now.
Yeah.
I got my to-do list done, birthday's done, and I can just like sit and enjoy the summer for a couple of days. My husband was like, just so you know, I left work on Friday and I told my coworkers that I wasn't coming back because we were having a baby. So don't ruin this for me.
That's ballsy. That's
Yeah. I was like,
ballsy.
okay, cool for you. I don't care.
Yeah.
Her birthday was the Friday. The Saturday, my brother took my middle son out for lunch for his early birthday because he was going out of town for work. But he brought him back like half an hour later because my son threw up.
Oh, fun.
And I was like, great, what did he eat? Well, that night, my husband, my daughter, and my son were barking their guts out all night. I had had it the week before,
No.
thank God. But I was lying there. Bless my husband. He was like, you know what? You a couple of times I mentioned that like maybe something's happening. If you're gonna go into labor, I really think you should just sleep. I'm gonna go lie on the floor of the kids' room. We're all gonna throw up together. You should get some sleep.
Oh
But I
no.
couldn't sleep. I was listening to them throwing up all
Yes.
night. And like sometimes my husband would go throw up in the bathroom and I could hear the 3-year-old be like, Mommy, I need to throw up. So then I would go in there with a bucket and make sure he was awake
Oh
enough.
no.
So we did not sleep that night. None of
Yeah.
us.
Yeah.
That night, I was like, well, I guess I'm not going to mass in the morning. But then I woke up to a text from our family chat of my mom being like, I was throwing up all night. Can someone bring the 13-year-old, like my youngest brother, to mass? And I was like, well, I was the only one apparently not throwing up all night. So I guess I'm going to bring him to mass. But I
Yeah.
had it in my head that I needed to go to mass, that
Mm.
I just needed to do that before I could have a baby. And in my head, I was like, something's happening. My water's not gonna break at church. Like that'd be weird. So I was like, but what if it happens?
Yeah.
It it did not happen. I went to mass. It was the reading of Mark when Jesus raises the little girl from the dead,
Mm.
which has been a very special scripture reading for me. It just it's just come into my life a lot of times to the point where I'd always thought that if I had another girl, I would name her Talitha, like when he says
Hmm.
Talitha. So then I was like, oh, maybe I'm having a girl.
Hmm. Yeah. Is it a God
Anyway,
incidence?
so I was at mass. I went up to receive communion, and I remember coming back to my pew and kneeling to pray. And I'm not very charismatic. I don't talk about stuff like this, and I don't even really know how to describe it other than I just remember kneeling and praying and feeling like Jesus and Mary were on either side of me. Like it wasn't a vision.
Mm.
It was just this feeling
Yeah.
of them being there and saying, "It's time. Like it's okay.
Hmm.
You can do this. It's time." And I just felt myself go, "Okay,
Hmm.
okay, I'm ready." Uh,
Wow.
so I left the church, got home, and then I went insane. I was like, my mother and my husband were barfing all night. They need to take care of me. So I need to feed them. I need to hydrate them. I need to
Hmm.
let them rest because I need them like ready to go. So
Yeah.
I spent the day like making broth and tea and feeding them and not resting, which I also should have done, but no, I shut up. Because we had
Yeah.
tomatoes that were gonna go bad.
Of course. Of course. Yeah.
And finally got the kids into bed, sat down. This is I'm gonna include this because it's a lesson that I learned. I didn't eat very much that day, and I was like, oh, I really need to eat. If I'm going to labor, I really need to eat. So I made a giant meal. That was a mistake.
Yes.
Um, so I sat down, I watched a movie, I ate my giant meal, and when my husband walked in around like 10 or so, he started talking to me, and that was the first time when I was like, I can't talk right now.
Oh, yeah.
Um, and he was like, okay, and then he finished what he was saying. And we kind of tried to watch the movie, but I feel like I was at the point where it was just annoying me.
Hmm.
So pretty shortly after we finished the episode of where we were watching, I was like, and every time I do this, if you think you're going to labor, go to sleep.
Yes.
Wait, did I do that? No, I did not. I stayed up to watch an episode of a show. I
Yeah.
was like, I should probably try and go to sleep. So I think it was around 11 or so probably when I was like, okay, let's go to sleep.
Yeah,
Um,
that's late.
anyway, I don't exactly remember how long I tried lying in bed. And I don't know about other people, but I find as soon as I'm reclining, my contractions are so much more uncomfortable.
Hmm.
Um,
Yeah.
so I think I tried to sleep for maybe an hour, maybe two, and then we kind of shuffled over so that I was like kind of on the edge of the bed, and then Matthew was kind of wrapped around me so that every time I had a contraction, I would kind of sit up and he would, if he woke up enough, he would like push on my back. But he's a very deep sleeper. And I
Yeah.
started to get annoyed at him when he kept not waking up when
Right.
I went to sit up. So I was like, okay, where you need to get up. And then he was like, okay. And it was really sweet. He like got up, we went out into the living area and I sat on the couch and he like lit all these candles that he bought for me
Aw.
to make the ambiance nice. And then we kind of just sat, we would kind of like recline or like kind of slump over on the couch because it's not a very big couch, kind of slump over. And then I would have a contraction and then I would kind of like whack him. And I would usually, I think I was bent over the couch and he would like push on my back or rub my back or whatever I needed. Um, and it would kind of go on like that. Every now and then he would sleep through it and I would get really mad at him.
Yeah.
Occasionally I would like fall just asleep enough in between that a contraction would come and I would try to see if I could just like breathe through it without having to move. But at that point, I could only do it a couple of times and it was pretty unpleasant.
Yeah.
Yeah, so we kind of got into a system where, yeah, I would get up, he would give me counter pressure or whatever I needed, push on my back or my hips, and then when the contraction was over, I would sip some water, go try and pee, go back to the couch and try and doze. During all of this, I had a really, I was in such a bad mood. Like with my second, I remember like a contraction would come and it was kind of like at the beginning, it was like almost like a fun challenge, but like, okay, like let's see how I can like work through this. This time, I don't know if I had a harder time getting into a position that felt more comfortable. I was also probably really tired. Also, my dinner was like sitting in my stomach, and I felt like I needed to either have a bowel movement or throw up, and I couldn't do either. So then I was just like focusing on that discomfort.
Oh, yeah,
Um,
totally.
that was not pleasant. So, and I just remember like the contraction would end, and I'd just be like, "This sucks. I don't want to do this. I,
Yeah.
I don't feel like I'm handling this well. I don't feel like I just don't feel good about this. Mostly, I just wanted to go to sleep."
Yeah, fair. That's
And
understandable.
I let myself, I got to the point where I was dreading contractions. And I think that
Mm,
was also not good, but I didn't know how to come out of that mindset.
mm.
Um, so instead of kind of like accepting or welcoming each contraction, I was just like, oh no, 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 no. I don't know. I just felt really scared and unsettled and not very good. I don't remember how much time passed exactly. It felt like a while where I would kind of sleep and then get up and sleep and get up and go to the bathroom. But eventually, and I don't remember why I did decide to start timing them on my phone. Usually now or by now, I don't time them until it feels like I need to because it's kind of a pain.
Yeah.
Um, so I got my phone app and started timing them, maybe between like 3:30 or 4 a.m. And at first they were anywhere from like 12 to 7 minutes apart, all lasting over a minute. So it felt pretty all over the place. And I was whining and complaining. I was tired. I was frustrated and I didn't want to do it. Felt like I was going to be doing it forever and I just wanted to take a nap. Um, like it felt like they weren't close enough together to feel like encouraging, like something was
Yeah.
happening. They weren't far enough apart to feel like I could actually rest between them.
Yeah.
Um, so just felt really discouraged. Um, Sometime after 4, though, I think I could sense or I noticed that the spacing was shortening a little bit. Like if I looked at the app that I have, it shows it doesn't or what I can look at the average
Hmm.
um of the contractions because I don't know about everyone else, but mine it's not like consistently like gets smaller and smaller and smaller and smaller and like stays certain numbers. But if I can look at
Yeah.
the average, I can kind of see if there's progress or not. Progress.
Yeah. That dreaded word, hey?
Yes, I don't like that word. I don't know why I used it. Anyway, I noticed the spacing was shortening a little bit, and some were getting really back to back, and some were feeling really long. So by 5, the average on my phone app roughly was a little over 5 minutes apart, which reality was like 3 minutes, 6 minutes, 1.5 minutes. I decided that I would call my midwife at 6 if they had gotten to 5 minutes or less. So by 5 minutes to 6, it said close to 4 minutes. So I called the pager right at 6 a.m. on the dot. My midwife sounded very sleepy when she answered. She asked me some questions, like how long, how intense, how I was doing.
Yeah.
She said she would come for 7 o'clock, but to call her if anything changed. I remember she wanted to listen to me going through a contraction, but then for some reason, that specific time, it was like a half or like a half-ass contraction. I don't know, it like started and then stopped. She was like,
You're
"Oh,
like,
that
what the
didn't
heck was that?
yeah." And she was like, "Oh, that sounded not very long." I was like, "I swear the rest of them were longer."
Yeah.
She was like, "Okay, well, I'm gonna come at 7, but like call me if anything changes." So that I think that helped me a lot, being like, okay, like she's coming, so clearly we're going somewhere. And I think that mental boost was very helpful for me. In between contractions at that point, my husband started kind of like setting up like a table for my midwife, making sure our vehicle was off the driveway and like kind of puttering around doing little things.
Yeah.
Some of the candles had burnt out, so I went around relighting them. Um, my midwife walked in or texted that she'd gotten there and Matthew was going to go help her bring her stuff down right as I was in the middle of barfing through a particularly gnarly contraction.
Oh, yeah.
Which at that point, though, I actually was happy about because I was like, oh, if I'm throwing up, like things are getting real.
Yeah. That's a good
So,
sign,
yeah.
right? Body is emptying.
Um, so she set down her stuff and she wanted to check me, which I was like, okay, but I don't want you to tell me what I am.
Mm,
I was like, I don't need that mental kick to the face. Um, and I made her wait a bit because I was like, I don't want to be lying down while I'm in the middle of contraction.
yeah.
So I kind of labored around. She washed me, and eventually I was like, okay, you can check me. So I lay down. I was like, if you tell me that I'm a 3, I'm going to cry. So don't
Yeah.
tell. She was like, okay, well, what do you want to be? I was like, what? I don't know. She's like, just pick a number. I was like, 6. She was like, you're a 6. I was like, I don't believe you. You're lying to me. Um, she was like, no, you're actually 6. You dilate to a 7 when you contract. And I was like, oh, okay, cool. That's
Sweet,
better than the
thanks.
3.
Uh-huh.
That's better than the 3. Um, so she's like, yep. She asked, I think she said, if you guys want to set up the pool, like, you can definitely do that right away. Um, so Matthew started hooking stuff up, filling up the pool. And at that point I was kind of like crouched on the edge of my bed, and I'd kind of found like a weird position where if I could like relax just enough to not move, then it like felt okay. So I was just like sitting there, like willing the pool to fill up faster.
Yeah.
I was
It's
like,
like watching paint dry. It's
yeah,
literally
I'm
the
like, I
worst.
just want to get into the water. Like that's the thread that I'm holding on by, is knowing I can get into the pool soon.
Yeah.
Um, and I felt a shift, and I think she heard a shift because all of a sudden I went from quietly breathing to like making low sounds. And I like saw out of the corner of my eye, my midwife kind of like perked up and looked over at me, and she mumbled something to Matthew. I didn't know what it was. Later, I found out she said, "I hope the pool fills up fast enough."
Yeah.
Which was all like, it's so nice looking back on because my last 2 labors were so long, and it felt like there was no way to tell if I was actually making progress and nothing to encourage me.
Mm,
Uh, so I am sad again that I was so crabby about it, because all these things I was registering and they were giving me hope, and I wish I'd enjoyed them a little more.
right.
Um, so while the pool was filling up, I started making low sounds. I changed into my swimsuit and waited for the pool, and then they told me I could get in. I remember them saying that the water wasn't quite warm enough, and it wasn't quite full enough, but we ran out of hot water. Thankfully, someone had loaned us an immersion heater, so we put it in a bucket, and it actually worked really well. Anyway, I finally got into the pool, and it was lovely. Always like the
Yes.
moment of like, oh, thank you,
This is
Jesus.
what I've been waiting for.
Yes, I've been waiting for that. At one point, I don't remember what time I got into the water. It started to get light out, I know. I remember my midwife picking up her phone to look at the clock while she listened to the baby's heart rate, and it said 7:45.
Okay.
Um, so I was in the pool, and I was kind of just like leaning back against the back of it with Matthew up behind me, and I would just kind of try and like go limp. Because that's kind of like, try to cope through my contractions. I try to go as limp as possible.
Mm,
And try to focus on just like relaxing all of me and breathing really low and just getting through it.
yeah.
So I was using like my husband's shoulder as a headrest and just like going really limp, and then he would like rub my back or my shoulder if I gave him any kind of direction. In between, he would like bring me water or whatever I needed. Around 8:30, my 5-year-old walked in and asked what was going on, and we'd actually talked to her previously about if she wanted to, she could be there.
Okay, yeah.
But we weren't gonna wake her up. We weren't gonna like go out of our way to make it happen necessarily or to push it on her. But if it worked out and if she wanted to be there, she was allowed to be there. And so she woke up around 8:30 and decided to stay.
Okay.
Um, and she was great. She sat really quietly. Every now and then she'd come and give me little hugs and kisses, and then go back to sitting and watching. And that was all she did.
Wow.
She was
5-year-old
great.
girls, they're magical creatures.
They are magical, or she's very magical. At one point, she went up to get a snack, and I could smell that it was oranges. I remember smelling the oranges.
Mm.
Um, I remember it was taking all my concentration not to fall apart during a contraction, because with my last birth, I remember feeling myself snap. Like it was
Mhm.
like something in my brain snapped and I went insane. And so I really wanted to not do that at that time, this
Yeah.
time. Because like last time I didn't know I was in transition, and I think that's why I snapped, because I was like, oh my gosh, I'm going to be doing this for so long. If I get to that point, it means that I'm almost done, and I think I can hold it together.
Hmm.
So it was getting really hard, but I'd thrown up a couple more times. I remember shivering. I was really cold, which I think I remembered being a sign.
Hmm.
So all of these, I was like, it was like hard and not pleasant, but I was taking as encouragement and being like, okay, like things are moving along. Things are good.
Yeah.
They're doing what they're supposed to be doing. I had a really, really rough contraction, and my midwife asked if I wanted to play music, which I'd never done with my previous births. I assumed that the extra stimulation would just like annoy me. But earlier that night, actually, I had very half-assedly thrown together random collection, mostly of Audrey Assad songs.
Mm.
So I told him to open it and play it. And it did help. Just like her
Hmm.
voice is very soothing, and just kind of like listening to the words of the songs that I knew really helped me. And I have this actually really nice memory now of leaning back and hearing her repeat like "it is well with my soul," and just like
Oh,
really
yeah.
focusing on what she was saying and going like "it is well," like, and just trying to really lean into that.
Mm, beautiful. Yeah.
Every now and then my midwife would ask if I was feeling pressure, and I'd be like, no, not other than, the horrible pressure of contraction
Yeah.
tearing me apart, but nothing new or interesting.
Yeah.
And I'd be like, no, I don't think so. And because she kept asking, because she was going to call her back up at the last minute, because I think she'd just been at a birth. And she's like, I'm going to let Carissa sleep as long as she can. And then when you tell me you feel pressure, I'll call her. She's like a few minutes
Yeah.
away. So I was like, okay, whatever. I don't care. I
Good
remember feeling,
mindset.
yeah, I'm like, whatever. I was so tired. I just remember looking at my husband and being like, I just want to be pushing. I want this to be over. I am so tired. I want to sleep and I can't sleep and I am not
Hmm.
having a good time. I can't do this anymore. It was getting to the point, yeah, where it was just like it took every particle of my being to like breathe and relax and just move through the contractions. And my husband would kiss me and rub my shoulders and do what he could and tell me I was doing great, which I was like, you're only saying that because you want me to feel better. I don't believe you. I don't feel like I'm doing great. And I remember I did shift around a couple of times, but I liked leaning back because I was able to relax a little bit more. I was able to like rest in between, and the pressure, the pain was less.
Yeah.
But at one point, I remember it crossed my mind to be like, when I pushed my second out, I was on my hands and knees. I bet you if I got up, this would be over pretty soon. I was like, that's gonna hurt way too much. I don't want to do that. I'm gonna stay here. I'm not gonna move. So then I had a couple of more really, really difficult contractions, and I was like, fine, I'm gonna do it. So I got up into kind of a frog position on my hands and knees to try and get gravity to help me. And it hurt like a bitch.
Yeah, it
It was
does.
not fun. And my husband was trying to give me counter pressure, but that at that point that was not doing anything at all. And that's when I snapped. All of a sudden I was on my hands and knees and there was a contraction and it sucked. And then another one came and I started writhing. I like kind of like propped myself up on the pool and I heard my voice change. It went from like low moaning to the feral pushing sound.
Yeah.
My midwife like snapped her head around and went, "Are you pushing?" And I was like, "I don't know." And
I don't know.
she was like, there was another contraction at that point. Because I think the first time I did like a test push. I was like, "Am I pushing?" And I was like, "Oh, yep, yep, I am." And then another
Yeah.
contraction, and I was pushing. She was like, "You need to stop." I was like, I cannot stop. I physically cannot stop."
Yeah.
So then there was a rest, and she was like, you need to slow down. You need to stay in the water, or the baby, like, you got to
Yeah.
stop." But I could not. Like, it felt like I was out of control of my body. I basically lost my mind. My husband grabbed me by the hips and pinned my pelvis into the water while my midwife grabbed my leg to try and shift me sideways so she could like help guide the baby out. Because I think his shoulder got stuck because
Okay.
we had asked for Matthew to catch the baby and he was there. And then she said, "Oh, I'm sorry, Matthew. I need to do this."
Yeah.
Like it all happened so fast. I pushed and she was like, "Slow down, please. I don't want you to tear." And I yelled, "I can't. I cannot. I cannot."
Yeah.
Um, and boom, he was out. And I caught him. And I remember he flew out of the water. I leaned back and I held him to me. And I was like, that was what I was waiting for.
Yeah.
My midwife took a video, like, she must have like picked up my phone right after he was born. And it's just me holding him and staring at him in the water. And she was like, "You did it." And I just looked up at her and I was like, that was really hard.
Yeah.
That was really hard. It was very hard. With my second, I remember being in labor in transition and going, "This sucks. I don't ever want to do this again." And the second he was out of the water, I was like, actually, it was not that hard.
Yeah.
This time I was like, no, that was pretty hard. I
Yeah.
don't I don't enjoy the thought of doing that again anytime soon.
Yeah.
Um, but yeah, so he was born, and I looked at him and I held him, and he was crying, 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 and I kind of like, like you're in, they call it labor land, and then you kind of eventually you come out of it, and you kind of like are more aware of what's happening to you. And I was like, oh yeah, where's my dog?
Oh, yeah.
So, and I looked and she was right next to me crying, and I was like, oh my gosh, I've scarred her. Um, but then later on, I asked her, I was like, are you okay? Like you were crying? And she was like, I was so happy.
Oh,
'Cause
yeah.
apparently, when I started pushing, I scared her, which is very fair. I made a lot of
Yeah.
noise. As she ran into my room with her hands over her ears. But then she heard my midwife yell the heads out. And so she like came back because she wanted to see. And so she saw everything. Um,
Yeah.
but I asked her later, I was like, would you like, how was that? Like, are you okay? Do you want to, like, would you do that again? And she was like, yeah.
Hmm.
So it really was the answer to every little stupid prayer of mine, down to like when I wanted it to happen, who I wanted to be there, how I wanted it to be.
Yeah.
Um, it really was an answer to all of my prayers. And so my only regret about it, or my only like sad feeling about it, is I wish I had been able to not enjoy it, because can you enjoy labor? Um, but I wish that I had just been more accepting of it and been able
Mm,
to appreciate it um, more. Because it was
yeah.
my smoothest, fastest, most kind of like cut clear labor.
Yeah.
And like now looking back on it, it really was very beautiful. There's so many little beautiful details. Um, yeah, pretty
Yeah.
sweet third labor.
Yeah. There's just so much. Like it's really interesting because I think because he was born at like what,
Oh,
before
sorry.
9 a.m.?
He was born at 9:29 a.m. I pushed
Yeah.
for 3 minutes.
Yeah. So when you look at it, like in the grand scheme of things, from like that 11 o'clock to, 9 o'clock the next day, like not even a full 12 hours.
Mm-hmm.
And yet, the hardest thing that you probably did this year, like,
Yep.
right? And it's
The,
just
the
so interesting.
longest, the longest, what, 10 hours, 10 and a half hours
Yeah.
birth of my life,
Yeah.
but over so quickly.
Yeah. And like when you're going through it, it's so hard, so hard. And then it's over. And you're like, wow, that was a wild ride. I would love to hear if you felt like how that birth ended, brought you into like a deeper realization, appreciation, whatever that might look like with motherhood as you know it right now. Has there been anything that's changed since your third was born?
Um, I really, I really appreciated my oldest too. Like, obviously, I love my baby, and I will talk about him a lot in a
Yeah,
minute. But I really appreciated my older two, especially my oldest, and just how like sweet. And I think we can underestimate how intuitive small kids are. Like, I was
mm,
really worried that she would just be really needy and demanding and a lot. But I think she really knew to just sit and watch, and to stay out of the way. And a bonus of having her there was she was very empathetic for a while afterwards. She'd be like, "Oh, like let mommy rest." She
oh
just had a
yeah.
baby, and she viscerally understood what that meant.
Yes. Yeah. Again, there's that intuition though that we like, I think, don't, yeah, like you were saying, don't give them enough credit for. Is like back in the day, that's what little
They
girls would
were
have
there.
known. They
Yeah.
would have been there. We would have experienced it our
Well, and I
whole
feel like that's
lives.
why I wanted her to be there, or like the idea of her being there was because she was so interested in all of my appointments. Like she came with me to most of them. She had a million questions for my midwife.
Of course.
And so that was kind of what got me interested in even considering it. Because previous to that, I'd always said, like, I literally only want my midwife and my husband there, and that's it. Like, I am not about the invite a bunch of people
Yes.
thing at all. Like, I am a photographer and I love the idea of birth photography and think other people should do it. And I don't hate the idea of having my birth photographed, but I don't want a photographer there.
Yeah, if they can be invisible flies on the wall.
Yeah, I
Yeah.
don't want that extra person. Anyway,
Yeah.
um, but I wanted her, my hope was that she could see that and see that what I really wanted to hit home for her was, and I kind of mentioned it to her when I was like, that was hard, that was hard, was I was like, that was so hard, but I did it and I'm so happy.
Yeah.
Um, because we had shown her some birth videos before to kind of prep her and get a feel for where she was at. And at first, she really didn't want to. She thought it was really scary. And I was like, oh, never mind. But then she kind of expressed interest. So I showed her some again. And we kind of talked to her about, like, yeah, that's really hard. Like, mom is going to be in a lot of pain, but she's really
Yeah.
excited to do it. Like,
Yeah.
we chose this. We're really happy about this. It's actually so beautiful. Like I told her, like, my favorite thing that I've ever done, like the highest high I've ever felt, my happiest moments of my entire life is that when that baby is scooped out of the water and put on my chest. Like when I watch that in someone else's video, I weep every single time.
Yeah. Well, because it's like the best experience
Like I've
ever.
never done any drugs, so I can't say this from experience, but I just imagine, I
Yes.
cannot imagine, I can't imagine any high from a drug comparing to the feeling of that moment when it's over, when you did it and you brought this person into the world.
Hmm.
It is the best feeling in the whole world.
Yeah,
And I think I kind of
absolutely.
freaked people out because I was talking to like my brother's friend and his wife were over and she's expecting. Um and I like anytime I hear about a new mom, I'm like, oh my gosh, like I'm so excited for you. Like birth can be so great, like being a
Yes.
mom can be so great, but I think I could sometimes get a little bit too intense about it. Especially because there are a lot of people who just assume that birth is hard and yucky and nasty and just something you kind of have to suffer through and then
Right. And
move
that's how
on.
you get a baby. And that you have to do it. And it's a have to, not a, yeah, a mindset shift of, well, it can also be beautiful. And it can also be incredibly rewarding and like challenging, but like a moment of pride. I remember after I had, and I'd love to hear your thought on this. After I had Gus, my second, I remember being like, I could do that again. I don't want to do it again, but I could do it again. You know, where you're like, wow, that was like the hardest thing I've ever done, and I did it, and I could
Yes,
do that
exactly.
again.
Exactly. That's exactly how I feel. Um, I now like it took me a little bit longer after my third to be like, okay, like I'd be okay with doing it again. At this point, I've forgotten all the hard stuff. I'm like, it really wasn't that bad. I was such a whiner. Um,
No, it was probably that bad. Yeah.
but I do have a bit of an aversion to the idea of the pool. Not like I would use a pool again, but in my mind now, there's a bit of an association with discomfort, let's say.
Yes.
Um, that being said, I want to do it again. I probably will do it again. And I had a friend who just had a baby at the beginning of December, and it was her fourth. Um, and she had some fear going into it. And so we were kind of talking, and I was like, it's going to be so great. Like, you've had three beautiful, wonderful home births. And like, I'm so jealous of you that you get to have that moment of like bringing your baby to your chest. Like, that's like, I live for that. Like, there's nothing like it. And you get to experience it again. And I want to live vicariously through you. Like how wonderful. Like, I remember, I think I might have been pregnant, or maybe I wasn't pregnant yet with my third, and I was just with my family. I think I was complaining about pregnancy a little bit, um, and maybe describing something about birth, and my brother was like, "Wow, I'm so glad I don't have to do that." I was like, you know what? I am so sad for you
Yes.
that you don't get to experience feeling life grow inside of you, and then do the life changing work of bringing that person into the world.
Yeah.
Because I can't describe it to you. I will never be able to explain it to you,
No.
and you won't
Yeah.
ever get to understand.
Yeah. And you're missing out. Like you
And you're
are.
missing out. You really are.
Because what is the like hardest, most difficult, most painful thing that we ever have to go through is also the most elative, amazing, like high experience. And it truly is because even physiologically, like we understand that's why we have endorphins and oxytocin and all of these hormones in our bodies, and we are given like a drug response in our body so that we don't just like throw the thing out,
You're
right?
like, oh God.
I can't believe this thing just made me do that. Gone. Like it's like no. It's so that we want to have our babies on us, so that we want our partners close, so that we're not just like everything get away from me because I hate you all now, you know? Um And yeah, how sad that men will never get to experience that at all.
Yep.
And but I think it's true, like, that we often hear of the bad. And that's, yeah, of like how difficult it is and how hard
The
it is. And
just you wait culture. I'm kind of
yeah.
waging a silent war against it now, where if I like am talking to new moms or just like moms who are having a hard time or whatever, like because obviously I meet a lot of moms through
Yeah.
my and a lot of new moms or expecting moms, and I really and like not in dishonesty, like I tell them very honestly how I feel, but that this is amazing. You
Yeah.
are amazing. What you're doing is amazing. Like just wait until like your baby meets your new baby. It's so wonderful. Like just wait until your heart
Yeah.
grows again because your love isn't finite and you meet this new
No.
person and you just adore them and it's just more love.
Yeah.
Wait until you get to experience like baby sneezes and like
And
just
when
like
they're
every
cross-eyed
yeah,
eyes
yeah,
finally lock in on your eyes and you're
yeah.
like, "Oh my gosh, they're
Or just
looking
like
at
skin
me."
to skin cuddling them and like
Yes.
seeing your partner like step up and like take care of you in a way that you had no idea that
Possible.
someone could behave so selflessly towards someone.
Yeah.
Like there's so much good to look forward to
Yeah.
amidst the suffering and I do believe that the suffering and the hard parts is what makes it so beautiful.
Yeah.
Like if it was all easy and nice, would we really appreciate it? Or
Yeah.
would we just take it for granted?
Yeah. Well, it's like that saying, like, you can't have sweetness without bitterness, right? Like, I don't think that's the exact saying. I'm totally blanking because it's 10, almost 10:30 p.m. But yeah, that idea of like you can't have good without bad, or
Like
you
very has a
wouldn't.
good contrast.
Yeah.
Or like
Um,
sorry.
no, no, go ahead. You're good.
I was trying to explain, I was like, the closest thing to like trying to explain it is like if you've ever climbed up a mountain, it sucks and it's hard and it's grueling. And you're like, why am I doing this? And then you get to the top and you're like, this is amazing. And also I did like that was really hard and I did that. Like the challenge is part of the elation. If you got a helicopter ride up to the top and were plopped on the top, you would still get a great view and it would still be a cool experience, but you wouldn't have that like satisfaction of I did it, you know?
Yeah, definitely. What a Canadian analogy. I love it. A Canadian who lives in Okotoks. Okay, what is one piece of advice that you would want to share with a first-time mom?
Oh my gosh. Um, Sleep if you think you're in labor.
I
If
love
you think
that.
you're in yeah, if you think you're in labor, go to sleep.
Go to sleep.
Go to
You should
sleep.
put that on a shirt.
Yeah,
Maybe I'll do that on the back of my Ivania
you don't need to
Brube.
time it. You don't need to check and make sure if you're in labor. I promise you, if your baby is coming, you're not going to sleep through it.
So sleep.
You will, however, cry repeatedly on the sleep that you didn't get.
Yeah,
If
true.
you,
I love
no,
that.
but maybe I don't know. That one might be silly. Another
No, I
one.
love that. Sorry, if you have another one, go for it. But I love that one.
I guess the other one would be just like I ruined my first postpartum experience because of all my expectations of myself and like
Mm,
waiting for things to go back to the way they were. I'd be like, okay, well, by 1 month, I'm going to feel like myself again. I'm going to like be back into a routine. Oh, okay, I guess not. By 3 months, I'll like be getting enough sleep and I'll feel like myself again and we'll be back. Oh, okay, no. By 6 months, gosh, by 6 months, I must like if there's something wrong with me if by 6 months I haven't
right.
instead of being like, I can't go back. And why should I want to?
Yeah.
Why do I want to be the person who I was before I brought life into the world? Like,
Mm,
I like myself so much better now as a mom of three than I ever did before
yeah.
I had kids. And like, you know, not saying you don't have self-worth if you're not a mother. That's not what I'm saying.
Right.
But you did this beautiful, wonderful, incredible thing. Why don't you get to know her instead of trying to go back to the person you were before that?
Yeah, I love that too. That's a good piece of advice. I needed to hear that tonight. Uh,
Yeah, like just like give yourself grace for who you are now and the person you're becoming.
yeah, because you can't go backwards.
She is gone. She doesn't exist anymore.
Yeah,
Stop trying to find her
she
because she's
died.
not.
She
She's dead.
died so
She
you
died.
could be birthed as a mother.
Exactly.
Okay, so Where can people find you? So you mentioned at the beginning that you are a photographer.
Yes.
And Ivania, if you see any of our family photos anywhere on my social medias, on my website, things like that, this beautiful woman takes them all. So why don't you maybe share a little bit about that? And then if you're cool with it, I'll link your like website and maybe your Instagram in the show notes.
Sounds good. I photograph families mostly. I got into it because I bought a camera and wanted to take better pictures of my kids. And then I realized I really like taking pictures of moms specifically. Like
Mm,
mothers are so beautiful, and this is cliche and everyone says it, but dads don't really take a lot of pictures of moms.
they
And
do not.
they're really not flattering.
Yeah,
Um,
amazing.
so I remember after I had my daughter, a friend of mine was just starting into photography, and so she gave us a deal and she did our family photos. And I remember that was the first time, maybe ever really, that I looked at myself in a photo and I was like, wow, I look beautiful. I
Yeah.
don't think I'd ever thought about myself in that way,
Wow.
with that, like that honestly, that I, in that way.
Yeah.
And I remember being like, I want to make people feel like that.
Yeah.
I would
And
love to
now
make,
she does.
oh, thank you. And that's what I want. So yeah, I take pictures mostly of families like newborn, maternity. I love maternity. So I feel like maternity, we've got all kinds of feelings about the way that our bodies are making
Yeah.
us look and all the changes and how we don't feel very beautiful. And so I really love to try and make expecting moms feel beautiful because
Amazing.
you don't feel great. You don't think you look very great, even though you do because you don't feel great. And it's just nice to be able to
Yeah.
treat them like that. Um, yeah, I
Amazing.
guess I guess
Yeah.
motherhood, I guess, is my passion.
I love that.
I'm mostly on Instagram. I'm really bad at updating my website, although that's a 2025 resolution is to update
I
my
believe in
website for the
you.
first time in 3 years.
I believe in
Um,
you.
but yeah, my if you want to see my most current work and uh, I guess get in touch with me is Instagram or email.
Yeah. And we'll link that all in the show notes. So if you
Thank
are wanting to find her, definitely give her a follow on Instagram. Well worth it. You might see my family pop up there at least once a
I think
year.
you're the most recent one, actually.
Oh, there you go.
You're currently the star of my
Woot,
Instagram.
woot. Well, anyway, thank you, Vanya, so much for coming on and
Thank you
sharing
so much.
your mother of three wisdom with us and your story and being willing to share in such a vulnerable way with us on the podcast today.
Thank you for having me. Sorry at the end there, I kind of started blanking. I had to read from my diary.
Oh, it's good. Thank you so much for watching this episode. Like I said, it was such a good one. I had so much fun recording it with Ivania. She's actually the photographer that takes all of our family photos. So if you see any of the cute photos or my cute pregnancy photos that are up and around my website, Ivania is the one who took all of those. So, couple of things. First and foremost, if you loved this podcast episode, please make sure to subscribe, give it a 5-star review, and share what you think of it. If you are wanting to share your birth story, there's going to be a link in the description below. You can also find links to Ivania and her services in the show notes as well. And if you loved this episode, then make sure to check out my other offerings. So if you are expecting, you will for sure love Fearless Birth 101. It is my online course that is 9 units designed to be a comprehensive birth course for you. And there is a link down below that gives you complete access to it for 25% off for being a podcast listener. I hope that you enjoyed this episode and we'll catch you on the next one. Bye.